I hated it. Like, he's so sweet. And this one, I'm honestly just pissed off about. But the thing that's really cool. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This week, we're just gonna go over my March wrap up because I have some books that I need to just really just get off my chest. I got some trash. I got some stuff that I do kind of want to complain about a little bit. A popular book I want to complain about a little bit. And then I also have a 5-star read that honestly is a total comfort read. The guy in it, like, I am just smitten as a kitten with him. So I need to introduce you. You guys should get to know each other and y'all will fall in love too, okay? So that being said, I have 10 books all together. It's all romance, but I have some historical romance, some fantasy romance, some fairy tales, which that's where my bad one, well, one of the bad ones, and some really good ones are. And then I also have like a little dabble of monster smut. Not much, honestly not enough. I could have done with some more laughter, but I got like 2 monster smuts for you, okay? So that being said, let's jump into it. I will say that the books that I've already kind of talked about in previous videos, I'll just do like a quick little 1-sentence plot line. The ones I haven't talked about, I'll give a little more zhuzh for you, okay? A little more backstory, if you will. Jumping into it. The first one, I'll do the historicals. The first one's called Heartless by Kat Martin. And this, I'm gonna rate it like a 3.5 star, I think, okay? Which I think it's kind of lower. It's a good book, actually. It's a fun plot line. But I read this right after my 5-star read, so I think that might partially be why it's a little lower. But essentially what we have is we have a young woman, she's 14, incredibly naive, and she's working this land of the Earl, and she sees ladies going by and she wants to be like them. She wants to have an education, she wants to learn how to actually read, she wants to look elegant and sound eloquent. So she goes to the Earl, and he's like an old man, by the way. Well, he's older and he has an affinity for the young ones. You know, he's not the love interest though, but he makes a deal with her that she will be his mistress, and in exchange for that, he will send her to finishing school, buy her all her dresses, and turn her into a lady. She's thinking she just has to like sleep next to him. She doesn't actually understand what it means to be a mistress. So she enters into this very, very, very naive, all right? So he sends her off. She's gone for 4 years. They're never meeting. They're just exchanging letters. But he unfortunately passes away, and his young son takes over the earldom, finds the letters, finds out about the deal, and basically continues on with all of this and never tells her that the Earl she knew died, right? So it finally comes time for them to meet, but a couple days before they're supposed to meet in London, she actually brings like another man to the house, and our young Earl, shows up right in the middle of this when they're having this kiss, which does not look innocent. So he gets the wrong idea about what's going on. Imagine she's just a trollop. She's trying to convince him, no, I'm just innocent and I didn't understand what I was doing when I was younger, and I want to find another way to pay you and all this stuff. And she's actually incredibly intelligent and very useful for his businesses. So the story is about them trying to believe one another. There's definitely some miscommunication going on, and I'll leave it at that. I could go into it more, honestly. It's a good read. It takes a little bit to kind of get into. I think that's why I have a little bit lower read, because Kat, the author, her like first chapters are a little bit more background story, where personally I like to jump right in on something, which is why my next book, my 5-star read by Gail Callan, one of my favorite authors, that's honestly probably one of the biggest reasons why it's a 5-star read, because you're invested right away, all right? This is called The Beauty and the Spy by Gail Callan. If you're a fantasy romance reader, this would be a good book to start with if you want to try historical romance. But the premise of this is so great. Well, actually, first of all, before I even get into the premise, the man in this, okay, he is a cinnamon roll. Like, he comes across on the outside like he's a hard, crunchy, cold cinnamon roll, but he's actually nice and warm and ooey gooey on the inside. Like, he's so sweet, you know? Like, I'm smitten, okay? And I think you'd like it. So, that being said, the book. What we have is you start off literally in a ballroom. immediately getting into the scene. And we have a widow. Her husband that she had before treated her very poorly, so she just has a bad concept of what marriage is. And she's actually really bored with ton life and like just what a typical lady goes through day to day. She's very bored, right? So she snuck around her house and she ended up finding her father's journals and learning that he in fact was actually a spy master for England. And in his journals, he's talking about his spies and like what are good techniques and what makes a good spy. So when she's in the ball, she sees a man starting to act like super suspicious. So she starts following him and he's trying to basically get with his contact because he's right smack dab in the middle of a mission where he's trying to go after a traitor of England who actually was a woman that he was previously in love with. So there's a lot of good stuff in this. But he's with his contact and they're discussing some pretty heavy details. And she is in a wardrobe and hears all this. Of course, she gets caught. She's an amateur spy. So she gets caught by him and he immediately is like, you have to come with me. I can't let you go. You have to be my captive because you can't have her blabbing her mouth off, you know? And she's thinking that he's actually a traitor because he's an undercover. So she really hates him at first and she's trying to like call upon her spy skills that she got from her father's journals. And this actually ends up being an important man in all of this because he is a spy for England. And they kind of come together and she starts to actually become a part of the mission and he's finding himself just kind of slowly falling in love with her and he wants to be gentle with her, but he kind of can't because he's a spy, but he has a soft spot and it's good. It's really good. I could go into it more, but we'll just leave it at that. Like I said, I'm just smitten with him. He is a cinnamon roll. He's so great. Okay. Anyways, that's that. I can totally see myself reading this in the future again. I loved it so much. It's, like I said, the writing, it starts off in the action, so you get invested really well. The characters, they're very dynamic and they're interesting. They're all different. They don't have the same personalities, and it's just fun. So I would give it a shot. It's a good, sweet read. Okay, so if you need like a pick-me-up, like if you just read a dark romance and you need a pick-me-up, this would be a good book too. All right? All right, moving on. So as far as like the fantasy romance side went, it wasn't great this month, if I'm being honest, which is a little bit of a bummer because I've kind of been in a groove with fantasy romance. But I have 3 books that I'll discuss with you. 2 of them were from my TBR that I already spoke a little bit about with you. So we'll start with those. The one I was so excited for, you guys, River of Shadows by Karita Halley. Oh my God. Like I started off so high because the beginning of the book was fantastic and then it just nosedived. But anyways, as far as like a quick little premise of this, we have a girl who's going to Finland because she believed her father died of cancer. She finds out that he's actually a super powerful shaman and he went to the underworld to essentially ask the god of death to fix him. Ends up becoming his prisoner, and she also goes down to the underworld in order to save him and basically barter with death to exchange her life for her father's. That's the premise. A lot of, I saw on Amazon, like people were saying that it's kind of like the Labyrinth meets Finnish mythology. So when I heard Labyrinth, I immediately was like, hell yeah, I'm in, man. Plus too, the other thing that got me so excited is this was kind of touted as like a horror romance, which I've been looking for. So I'm God of Death, the Labyrinth, horror romance. Yes, I was so excited. So excited. Started the book, literally, the first, I don't know, maybe the first half, maybe not quite half. I was like getting up to my husband. I was so giddy because like the way that she was writing, she knows how to world build well, where she's not overdoing it, over explaining it to where you're getting bored. And she was building up that fear and it had that horror element and it was different and it was great. And I was so excited. And then you kind of get into the underworld, okay? Which the first half of it it's kind of like a journey. You're going through this really horror element up on Earth, and then once you get into the underworld, she's kind of going through these different things to get over to death, and there are things that involve a lot of action, and she has to fight and whatnot. So it's good. Like it's keeping your interest. You keep wanting to read more. You don't really want to set it down. So I was loving it. But then you meet the gods, okay? And this has nothing to do with Finnish gods being terrible. It's not like that. It's the way she wrote their personalities that kills it. Absolutely kills it. I want gods to be gods, okay? I don't like it when they start to have this modern feel to them. But the best way I can describe it is they almost had these personalities of more like teenagers or just younger individuals, almost to a point of like, I don't know if this is the right way to explain it, but like, I kind of was getting like almost like TikTok vibes, like the way they'd talk, like they would say yeeted across the room, talking about man buns, all sorts of stuff, okay? Like it was just very odd the way they were talking about stuff and what they're interested in and whatnot. And then on top of that, besides their kind of personalities feeling very young, very immature, and just interesting phrases to be coming from a god, let alone gods of the underworld. But then there's also like, God, sorry, moment of silence for that, but God loves coffee. If you saw my video about pet peeves, this is one of the books. God loves coffee to the point where he went to IKEA to buy a coffee press. Full honesty right there, okay? That's right in the book. I'm not making that up. So there's stuff like that, and he has an iPad and things like that. Like there's a lot of modern elements to it. And this is subjective. Some of you guys might be into this. I don't like modern day things in really fantasy books. And I want gods to feel like gods, not like people. So like that just created so many issues, and we kept referencing modern day things beyond that. Like we were talking about Lord of the Rings quite a bit, talking about Tinkerbell and other sort of like classic fairy tales, Disney fairy tales and things like that, that it was just, it turned real terrible. But where it actually started to nosedive is because at least the first part of the underworld, she's going through these different action sequences. So you're entertained by that because she's going through a journey, really. And then she finally gets to death, all right? And all of a sudden we go from having this journey to she's basically just with death in the castle. And they're supposed to like slowly be falling in love, but it doesn't even feel like that. It doesn't feel like she built a relationship at all. It just kind of happens. And it's not really instant love. It's just like when they first have sex, it just kind of happens. It's weird. It's kind of hard to describe. It's just, it wasn't done well. But one thing I will say that was cool was that there was a lot of kind of like creepier elements to it, which is, you know, the horror romance. That's what I'm excited for. Like there's this like almost zombie unicorn, and there's these like dead children that I think are on fire. It's a part of Finnish mythology, and lots of skeletons and this creepy looking things. So that was fun. But then the rest of it ruined it. The IKEA coffee press really messed with me, you guys. It probably shouldn't bother me as much as it does. But the idea of the god of death is just like, I need to have my coffee. I need coffee. So I'm going to go to IKEA to get a coffee press. I can't. I don't know. I can't. So I'm giving it 3 stars, which I think it's kind of generous actually for me. It's subjective, I guess. So just understand that it's very disjointed. The first part of the book, bomb sauce. So good, especially the very beginning of the book. It has that horror element, and then that just totally gets lost. But it was a rough one. I technically have the second book because I was overzealous and bought it because I was thinking, oh yeah, this is gonna be good, man. I don't really want to read it. Maybe I will in the future, but I don't really want to read it. So that kind of tells you a lot. Now for the other TBR book, this is the one I was telling you about where a lot of people were saying it's like a mind f***. And to be honest, I think it was probably when it first was published back in 2020 during the pandemic, because that actually plays into the book. But for me, it just kind of felt like this is no different than things that I've already heard. So I didn't really consider it a mind, but it was disturbing. Not in a good way. I didn't really like this. I gave it 2.5 stars. I don't really know why I read it though. I'm not into modern stuff, and I usually I try to escape from this world. So I don't really want to hear about stuff reminding me about what's going on, I guess. So I'll do a quick little plot. It's not a retelling of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, but you still have Frollo. The church is very big. And the idea of it is the 2020 pandemic kind of sent the US into this dystopian future where the Catholic Church and capitalism really is just reigns supreme. Like the Catholic Church runs everything. And obviously it's going to be their ideals is what's law. And then the whole capitalistic side is you can't really buy anything. Like you have to work yourself to death, and you're still not going to be able to buy insulin, buy enough food for you to be satiated. You're going to have more workhouse housing. So think more kind of what it was like back in the day during the Industrial Revolution of you're working all these crazy hours, and you live in the building that the warehouse provides for you because they just need you in and out working for them as much as possible. So that's kind of what's going on. There is this kind of Satanist cult that's trying to fight against it. And we have these 3 guys who come to the school, the Notre Dame school, where Frollo runs. He runs the Notre Dame school. And they're trying to figure out what secret he has because they kind of want to overthrow him. And Frollo, he's been abusing this girl. She's not a hunchback or anything, but he's been abusing this girl. He's had her since she was an infant, basically hiding her away in the attic of this dilapidated cathedral. And he's very abusive, very mentally abusive. He has hit her, and he's put all of the Catholic ideals into her. So that's where her mind is. That's all she's ever really known. She literally doesn't know anything else. She doesn't know another person. And she just has this idea of what God wants, what's good, what's bad, based off of the Catholic viewpoint. These 3 boys come in. They're the Satanists, part of the Satanist cult, and they eventually find her, and they're trying to kind of corrupt her. They very much take her away from Frollo, and Frollo's terrified of this because there's some sort of secret with her and him, and they ruin her, if you will. It's a whole sort of corruption story, if you will, but I kind of just still feel like it was abuse, honestly. It's just disturbing. She's incredibly naive. She hasn't had anybody else, okay? She's incredibly naive. So the stuff that the guys are doing, it's not love. I'm just gonna talk about it a lot because it's weird. If you want to jump ahead because you think you might want to read it, go to this time. But there's things in there, there's God. One of them is she gets on an altar, or not an altar, a crypt, and he takes her period blood because she's on her period and rubs it all over her face, and then he licks it off of his hand. And telling her to do certain things that that definitely hurt her sexually, but she likes it because that's how it's written, and it's just very, it doesn't feel like if you're kind of into more of that abusive romance and those red flags, no judgment. I would say personally, it doesn't really come off as an intriguing way of reading an abusive romance. It doesn't have any sort of appeal. It just straight feels like abuse. You feel uncomfortable. So just be aware of that. But to the point, you guys, she has to prove her love to one of the guys. And the way she has to prove her love is by killing herself. So he makes her hang herself, okay? And just trust me, hang yourself. And so he lets her hang herself. She's hanging there probably for a couple seconds before he grabs her because he wants her life. That's what he sees as her proving her love. Like, it's just ridiculous, honestly. Like, it is so ridiculous. And a lot of it I felt like could have been cut out too. Like, it was way too long of a book than what it needed to be. It was a problem. I wish I never read that book. But I'm gonna say 2.5 stars. It's 2.5 stars. I don't even know. Like, honestly, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. Even if you're into dystopian stuff, even if you're into abusive romance, it's just not good. It's just not good, okay? So there's that. But now, the last thing, okay, the last fantasy romance, it's another God of Death. It's called Kiss of Death by Alice Wilde. And this one I'm honestly just pissed off about because on Amazon, it goes through the whole description of what it is. And then at the bottom, it talks about how there's going to be shifters and whatnot. And there's none. So that just must come in the next book. It talks about this is a slow build, slow burn. And slow build is the perfect way to describe it, but simultaneously also just I don't think it was written well. I'm just going to come out and say it. If you know anything about story structure, the best way I can describe this book, the entire book should have been the first maybe 30%, 20 to 30% of the book, okay? Where it actually ends should have been the first plot point. It was so ridiculously slow. There were so many scenes that she essentially just repeated over and over, 3 times, that you're kind of this is pointless. This isn't even giving me any information. Maybe it will come into play in the second book, but it was ridiculous how much of this book should have been cut back. It really majorly needed to go through more edits, more revisions. But the premise of the book, it kind of has, it's not a retelling, but it has a Cinderella vibe that turns into the Beauty and the Beast vibe. So you have a girl, her father's dying, and her stepmother and stepbrothers, it's very Cinderella, treat her terribly. One of them apparently ends up being in love with her. But the stepmother is trying to marry her off so they can get money since the father is dying. And that is their only source of income, is her father. And she loves her father so much that she seeks out the God of Death to bargain with him. He's known as the bargainer, to exchange her life for his. And he says, okay, we'll do that, but you have to stay basically in the in-between world for this next month because this can't happen until the next full moon, I think. So she has to stay there for a month, proving that she's not going to try and rebuke on her deal. And her father won't die in that time frame. So in that month, while they're together, they're spending time together, trying to get to know each other. And he's at least written in a way where he has more godlike qualities. There's some interesting stuff to him where he doesn't just feel like a human, which I appreciated. But I kind of felt like with him, he kind of just was instantly in love with her. Not really showing it, but when you're in his mind, his POV, kind of he's instantly in love with her. And it was just a lot of, I didn't feel like the scenes with them together wasn't really building their relationship or showing that they were in love with each other. You kind of just felt like you were watching 2 people interact. That's where my problem was. So it was very boring. I felt lied to because there was no shifters or anything into it. They don't kiss until literally the last 5 pages. So I wasn't into it. And it just didn't feel like a relationship. It didn't feel like it built up really to anything. So I don't recommend that one either. That one I think I gave 2 stars because I just felt like the writing in it wasn't great. So it just needed to go through way more edits. Yeah, definitely 2 stars. So that's my fantasy romance for you. But moving on, we'll get into the fairy tales now. Okay, first one, I'm going to complain about it, is The Never King, okay, by Nikki St. Crow, I believe. I know a lot of people liked it. I know there's some other booktubers that really liked it. And I'm glad that you liked it. I hated it. so much. I hated it so freaking much. Mainly because there's just like a huge plot hole in it, and there's just a lot of scenes where Peter Pan will say one thing and literally the next scene is the complete opposite of what he just said. So it was just, I found it annoying. It has those characters that I complained about in my pet peeve video where the characters kind of all sound the same. And the girl, of course, is like, she is so just sexually affluent and it's shoved down your throat so many times. Like, it's not just said once. I've said this before in my previous video. I have no problem if we have a sexually affluent character, but you don't need to remind me of it constantly. You already told me. Okay, so I know. I don't need to know every freaking chapter that like sex is like the best thing and she's just like so good at it and she knows how to like take advantage of men and she knows her power and all this. You already told me that, okay? Like, I don't need to know. I know. But anyways, The Never King, if you somehow haven't read it, is the #1 fairy tale retelling on Amazon, which I think is bullshit. I have some other fairy tales I'm going to go over with you that are way better, in my opinion. But this, I read it because it was recommended to me, and it's also the #1 fairy tale retelling, which I'm not trying to shit on you, by the way. If you really liked it, good for you. I hated it. But I actually listened to it on Audible, mainly because I hit the sample, which I'll see if I can actually play the sample for you here. It's Peter Pan's voice.
Chapter 2. Peter Pan.
Honestly, like, I think I listened to that for half a second. I was like, yep, play. And it said it was a full cast. Another thing, by the way, of me complaining in my pet peeve video. It said it's a full cast, but the way that they freaking do it, the way they did it, is even though they have a full cast of characters for all of them, they each just get a chapter that they have to read in full, so they have to do the voices of all the other characters. Even though they have a full cast of actors, all right? So nobody sounds the same chapter to chapter. That is the dumbest thing in the world. I don't know why they did that. Not all the voices were great either. There was 2 of the male voices where like I just felt uncomfortable. Okay, like I felt weird. All right. So part of that could be why I don't view this. Like I gave this 2.5 stars. A lot of that could actually be because of the Audible situation. It was so distracting and just uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I could see how it could be better if I actually like read it in an actual book form. But my grief, right? I already told you the things about like the girl and her character and the guys. They all sound the same, but there's a huge plot hole in it. Okay, so if you haven't read this yet and you want to, skip to this time because this is gonna be a spoiler. But there's a huge plot hole that no one's talking about. The whole premise behind this thing, right, is we have Peter Pan. They're all grown up, by the way, and they're all hot, of course. And they're basically stealing away the darlings, so the descendants of the darlings, bringing them back, trying to get into their mind so they can see where Wendy put Peter Pan's shadow, because the island is dying. So they need the shadow, but Wendy hid his shadow somewhere, and they don't know where it could have possibly gone. They've looked everywhere, but essentially memories passed down in generations. Lives in the blood, if you will. All right, that's important, okay? It lives in the blood, passes down generations. Cool. Fast forward to the part Wendy dies before she ever has kids, okay? So why do Wendy's descendants have the memories? Because it's not really Wendy's descendants. It has to be her sisters, which they do describe, and maybe this is what it's meant to be. They do say that Wendy's sister was present, but from what I remember, it doesn't sound like she was in the room. She didn't know where Wendy put the shadow. So this makes no sense to me at all. Maybe she was there. Maybe I misunderstood, or maybe that's what they were trying to describe, that Wendy's sister saw Wendy put it into the trunk. But I literally was just like, how would Wendy know? Because that's the other thing, actually. No, it wasn't. Okay, no. So even if Wendy's sister was there, when they get to the memory scene, it's like they're seeing it through Wendy's eyes. Okay? Yep, this is coming back to me now. It's like they're seeing it through Wendy's eyes. They see her, like, how she knocks, where it is in the trunk. Her sister was, like, back in almost like the hallway, like, peeking around a doorway. And in the memory, when you get to that, you're basically in Wendy's eyes. This makes no sense. That is a huge plot hole, and I'm pissed about it. I don't know why, but I'm pissed. But, like, it's just... that should have been thought through, right? Like, that's, like, if this is the whole premise of the thing, of memories moving down through the blood, and then Wendy dies, that's not in the blood. Wendy's blood is not the same as her sister's blood. Her sister and all the descendants would not have the same vision that Wendy saw. Okay? It's just, it bugged me. It bugged me a lot, obviously. You can see that. So... yeah, that's a huge plot hole, and it bugged the shit out of me. So I just, there's that. And then also, like, this part's just ridiculous, okay? But there's a scene where Wendy is, I don't remember which boy she is with. She's with the twins, I think. But they're gutting a fish, okay? Gutting a fish. She's talking about the smell, how terrible it is, sliminess, whatever, scale, like, gets on her face, and she's grossed out. But then... there's this part where he tells her, you take the knife and you cut from the lip back to the anal fin. And her response is, did he just say anal? What? Like, it's just, you know, that whole sexually affluent thing and whatever. But, like, that's just a joke. That's terrible. Absolutely terrible. And then, like, the voices they try to do for each other, like when Wendy's trying to do the voices for all these guys, and, like, Peter Pan's trying to do the voice of the girl, and it's just, oh, it was comical. It was honestly, it wasn't comical. It was painful on Audible. It really was painful. It was not great. Not great. But yeah. I don't know how that's the #1 fairy tale retelling on Amazon. I really, really don't. I don't know if it's just because, like, it's rough sex, if that's, like, that's on trend right now. But it, like, it wasn't my bag at all. I'm not going to read the second one. I definitely won't listen to the second one. But it's just, Nikki is not my sort of author, I guess, you know? But for all of you who did like it, good for you. I had to point out the anal fin really got, like, I was dying laughing with that. And then when it got to the part where, with the whole, you know, blood in the memory, and then they said Wendy died. I remember stopping and being like, wait, what? That just ruined the whole plot line. Whatever. Anyways, so for the good fairy tales, I do have two, actually. One being a Peter Pan retelling. This is actually a series as well. I've only read the first book so far, but literally, like, I cannot stop thinking about the book. And I'm surprised because nobody gets kissed, okay? So I definitely, like, while I was reading it, I'm giving it 4 stars, but while I was reading it, I was kind of like, where's the romance, you know? So that comes a little bit later in the series. There are a couple things about this that I was kind of peeved on, but I can't stop thinking about it. So I'm giving it 4 stars. It's called A Land of Never and Night. Yeah, Land of Never and Night by Lily Archer. 4-star read. We're in modern day. We have darling descendants, and Peter Pan, he comes and he takes her away, bringing her back to Neverland, where all of the Lost Boys have now grown up. But they still, I appreciated this, they still kind of have that naive, boyish mentality, because this kind of happened all of a sudden, and they've always lived their lives as these young boys, right? Peter Pan needs her to help him get his shadow back, things like that, and asks her to tell them a story every night, basically read them a story every night. So that's really the premise of the first book. Pretty simple. This was the one that I was really nervous about. I remember talking to you guys about this before. I was really nervous about it because I couldn't tell the plot. And if I'm being honest, in this first book, in a way you could kind of describe it as being backstory. Like, I can't wait to get into the second book. Oh my God. But there was world building and kind of backstory to it. I was still very entertained. I didn't find myself, like, skimming or anything. I wanted to read each of the lines. But the thing that was so cool about this is it felt like a legitimate, like modern day situation of going back to the real Neverland, or the original Neverland, I should say. I think that was the aspect that I really enjoyed, is I felt like I was in this magical Neverland place that I experienced when I watched Peter Pan by Disney. You know, like there's these elements to it. Definitely has adult content to it. There's no romance to it. There's not even a kiss, but like the mermaids, they want to eat people, things like that. That's what I mean by adult content. But it felt like Neverland, which was really cool, and I think why I couldn't stop thinking about it, because I felt transported into a magical place. So that's why I dug it. But the thing is, like I mentioned, nobody even gets kissed. So I'm surprised I liked it, because I want romance, man. I want romance. And that's not really in the first book. But from what I'm gathering, from what I'm getting, Peter Pan sounds like he's actually going to end up being the bad guy. He's making her believe Hook is this terrible dude. He does come into play in this book, but I think he's going to be more part of the second book. And I think he's actually going to end up being the good guy. Peter Pan's the villain. Hook's going to be the good guy. That's what I think. And I think Hook's going to be the love interest. It was funny. I caught myself when she started describing like a pirate. I caught myself smirking and just been like, yeah, that's my man right there. I love me a good pirate. But it was good. I'd recommend you read it. It's definitely, the whole series is out, so you can go through all of it. Just be aware that there's not really any romance, nor even a kiss in the first book, okay? So it's definitely slow burn, for sure. Just keep that in mind. It's not obvious when you read the synopsis that that's going to happen, so I was a little pissed about that, but now that I've completed the story and I can go into reading the second book, I'm still very happy. So it's 4 stars. Okay. Now, moving on. All right, this next one, I'm not gonna lie, this is probably probably my favorite fairy tale now. It is just such a neat concept. She wove Sleeping Beauty and like Marie Antoinette's life together so well that if you know the history of Marie Antoinette and you kind of know that backstory, the French Revolution, all of that stuff, the author's really kind of tickling, I don't know if this is the right word, but like your intelligence bone? I don't think that's the right word. But it's just, I love when authors recognize that their readers aren't stupid. You know, like I hate when authors, like, they're trying to drill into your head that there's a certain plot point coming up and they want to make sure you understand it, that you're reading it and you're like, no, you know? So I appreciate an author who realizes that her readers are smart, you know? But it weaves the classic Sleeping Beauty tale, like literally this is the classic Sleeping Beauty tale with Marie Antoinette's life. So we have a girl, she's human, and at 16 she's supposed to prick her finger on a spindle and the whole land is going to go to sleep, right? But she essentially that doesn't happen, and she just kind of goes on living her life and nothing's really happening. The curse isn't coming to fruition. But her mom, she got rid of all the spindles, basically tanking their economy, but she's expecting that her daughter is still going to be able to get married now that the curse didn't happen. Lo and behold, no monster, because she's cursed. So years go by. They're struggling, and finally this Fey prince comes along and he's willing to take on the cursed woman. And this is where the whole Marie Antoinette side kind of starts. So she has to give up everything of who she is, what she is, and basically turn into a fae. She doesn't really become a fairy, but she has to take on all of their clothes, all like their personality and how they just kind of talk to one another, and accept that she will never have privacy again because that's just part of their court and things like that, and just do it with no fuss, okay? Like she just needs to do it like that at a drop of a hat. And that's quite difficult, especially literally having no privacy ever. So they kind of come together, her and the Fey Prince. They never actually met originally. He initially was quite shy. This is a little bit different than the Marie Antoinette story. Her and her husband actually get along very, very well, but he has certain like court responsibilities along with other court members who hold the power. They all have these different positions and titles. That is really interesting, by the way. I'd recommend it. So when you first hear like in the synopsis that she doesn't have any privacy, you're kind of like, oh, where is this going? This sounds like it might get like kind of abusive. It's not. It actually, in a way, makes sense. Like the actual backstory behind what she has to do, why she doesn't get privacy, why she has to like bend to his will instantaneously all the time. It actually makes sense. Okay, it's interesting. Just trust me on that. I don't want to like give it away. Just read it. It's not long, but they're coming together. They're falling in love. He wants her to still kind of be herself, and she's struggling trying to accept these sort of like fairy traditions. But the thing that's really cool that like I can't get over it, the whole Sleeping Beauty Marie Antoinette side, is the witch or the fairy that cursed her. She actually, I love a villain that has like a good reason, but she actually is the one trying to start the French Revolution, if you will. In this case, the Fae Revolution. So that's why she cursed Sleeping Beauty in the way that she did. And it's interesting because she's clearly the villain, but she cares so much for women and children and the poor that you find yourself kind of like, okay, I totally understand you. I totally understand your reasoning. So I can't wait to read the second and the third book. I'm very excited about it. It was very cleverly done. You know, I liked it a lot. So I'd recommend it. It's by Lydia Foxglove. I didn't say that. The Prisoner of Silk by Lydia Foxglove. It's good. It's good. I'd read it. But anyways, moving on. Last two books. This is the monster smut side of things, which I'm going to be straight with you. One of them I actually DNF, so we'll start with that one. And that's actually The Kraken Sacrifice by Katie Robert. I could not handle it, you guys. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I didn't know if I was really going to read any other part of this series. This is the one where it's like the Dragon's Bride, where we have the girls who a demon is selling them to various monsters to kind of essentially promise like they need to have a child because it gives them magic in their realm and things like that. This one has to do with the Kraken. And the girl in it, she's known for being basically believing that she's just really annoying, that she's too much, that no one ever wants to really deal with her because she's just kind of too much, her personality. And I feel bad for saying this, but she was like, Katie wrote her in a way where that she was to the point where like I could not keep going. Like I could not listen to her at all. And this might be because there was someone from my past who is similar in that regard, but she was also like a sociopath. So she did some stuff to my husband and I that I think it just brought those memories back that I could not go on with the book like at all. And I feel kind of guilty because she's talking about how, you know, she doesn't like herself and she feels so bad about herself because she's annoying and she's too much for people. And I couldn't handle her. Like, so I do feel bad, but I couldn't. So I DNF'd it. Maybe I'll read the Gargoyle one. Hopefully that one's more interesting, but the Kraken one I could not handle. So there's that. And then the last one, this is called Crow, okay? I can't remember who the author is, but there you go. This is called Crow. I totally, honestly grabbed it because of the cover. Like, look at that. That sounds like a joke. So I read it thinking that this is going to be, like, I'm going to have a good laugh. But the whole premise behind this is it sounds like he was a guy from a different realm and he was cursed because he had done something. So this witch cursed him to be like a full-blown crow. All right. And he comes to Baba Yaga to help him try and shift into like a man crow, which he's now capable of doing, but he can only do at night. It's incredibly painful. So he looks like this. All right. And there's this girl who, when he first flew into this realm as a full-blown crow, he ran into a window, got hurt, and this girl was the one that took care of him. So he's just, you know, he wants to protect her. He loves her, all that jazz. And Baba Yaga tells him that, you know, you need true love's kiss, which actually turns out to be true love's anal. And he has to lay eggs in her. So there's that too. There's eggs again. I don't know if male crows actually lay eggs, but anyways. So there's some interesting concepts here. You know, he ends up beating up her ex-boyfriend that was attacking her, and she's immediately apparently enamored. Again, with this is what she sees. And, you know, they begin their little tryst together, and they're trying to solve how to turn him back into a human. So, you know, there's kind of, I guess you can kind of argue this is a little bit fairy tale retelling. This is kind of like The Princess and the Frog. Not quite, though. But basically, they get to a point where he will be able to turn back into a human partially for the day. But she likes him as a half crow man, all right? And one thing I'm going to mention, go ahead and just skip here if you don't want to hear the ending. But they end up having kids, okay? And at the very end, the very freaking end, she's making a cake, but she doesn't have any eggs left. And her kids are over at Baba Yaga's house, but she has to pick them up in like an hour. And she desperately needs eggs and needs to try and get the cake done while simultaneously being able to the crow man. So she decides to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Nice pun there. And just use eggs from the crow man, which, by the way, her children were from these eggs. Use the eggs from the crow man to bake her cake. So she them, get the eggs out, bake the cake. You know? I'm not kidding you. That was in there. That's like the epilogue. But yeah, it was a wild ride. I'm honestly only going to give it like a 3-star. It's entertaining, I guess, but it's just, it's not as good as In His Web by Rebecca Massey. All right? But yeah. Anyways, I'm starving. This video is very long at this point. I hope you liked it. I'll try to get better and be like more succinct in future videos. But I'm starving, so I'm gonna go eat. I'll catch you guys next week. You have a good one. Or maybe I'll catch you on Monday. I might do my TBR for Monday. All right? Yeah. But anyways, you guys have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.